TC Jewfolk is supported by Maslin LLP, a Minneapolis commercial law firm dedicated to providing solutions for businesses, supporting the community, and advancing civil rights for more than 65 years. With particular appreciation of partner Leora Maccabee's contributions as a founder of TC Jewfolk, Maslin is proud to uphold the legacy of our founders Samuel H. Maslin, Marvin Borman, Hy Edelman, and Irving Brand. We are committed to serving both the community and the profession, as well as providing an exceptional standard in the practice of law. From corporate counsel to bet the company litigation, Maslin LLP. Online at maslon.com. Shana Tova to all. Welcome to this week's Who the Folk podcast. I'm Lonnie Goldsmith, the editor of TC Jewfolk. This week I talked to Minnetonka City Councilwoman Deb Calvert. We talk about what she's learned from her first term in office, why she's running for re-election, and we see if her favorites have changed from the first time we talked in 2016 on this week's Who the Folk podcast. Deb Calvert, welcome to the Who the Folk podcast. Thank you for joining me.
It's very good to be here. Thank you for having me.
So this is your first Who the Folk podcast experience, but we talked about 5+ years ago when in your first foray in running for office. Mm-hmm. You are now a Minnetonka City Council member. Back then you were running for State Senate District 44, if I recall.
Yes.
And you were unfortunately unsuccessful in that campaign. The next year you won the at-large seat on the Minnetonka City Council. You are now running for re-election. So I guess for starters, what did you learn from that first effort running for office that was not successful into that next year where you were successful?
Well, I mean, that was an extremely unusual election year. So, I mean, that's a complicated question. But, I think that in terms of just campaigning, getting an earlier start, which I did this time, mm-hmm. For when I ran for state Senate, I got in late because of other circumstances. Terry Bonoff stepped down from her state Senate seat to run for Congress, and there had to be a special convention, which was much later than the normal convention, and that was easily the 195 votes. That was a month delay. That's easily the 195 vote difference. And so I got a very early start, sent out a fundraising letter early, and started contacting people and just trying to put the pieces in place. And also, trying to take advantage of the things that you can take advantage of, like your experience, and using that as the positive reasons to get people on board. And, that was an open seat when I ran for state Senate. And, my last name isn't Anderson, it's Calvert Anderson. There were two Andersons in 44A, and they could just put their lawn signs up and they probably thought it was the same person. So, so there are all kinds of weird things, but, I think too that people are really craving positivity, especially now. Things are kind of dark and difficult, and people are looking for a unifying message, and they're looking for competence. And, I think people learned that integrity matters in the last, since then. And I think, making sure that you're out in the community, hearing what people have to say and really listening, and trying to accomplish some of the priorities that are out there in the community is really, really important. And when you're not an incumbent, you don't have that advantage. But having in 2017, having just run for office, I had door knocked, 10,000 500 people. And so I had a little bit of name recognition, and then I door knocked another, 3,500, 4,000 people then. And now I'm, out on the doors, door knocking.
I think one of the big differences is the first time running for a state legislative seat, the second time running for a city council seat. Geographically, it's obviously going to be a much smaller area.
But it's not. Minnetonka is 28.22 square miles.
Okay.
It's a large geographic area. So it's kind of it's a little bit bigger for a full Senate district.
Sure.
But it's not that much bigger. It's just different. It's not two different cities. It has kind of there are different neighborhoods and everything, but it's one city. That does make it different. And
with yours being the at-large seat as opposed to a ward, you do have the entire city as opposed to a pocket of it.
2 square miles. Yes.
So what is it that you've learned about yourself, about politics, about governing in this first term that sets you up for a second term?
So I learned that that my drive and my natural intellectual curiosity stands me in good stead. So I worked really hard to learn this job. And so, of course, I was on the planning commission before I ran for the city council, and that has to do with land use planning and zoning, housing development, and that is a lot of what city council members vote on. So that was a good training ground. And then as a city council member, you really learn, I took advantage of every opportunity. I'm on a National League of Cities, Energy, Environment, and Natural Resources Committee. I'm on a League of Minnesota Cities, Improving Services Delivery Committee. And that's been a tremendous help over during COVID and all the challenges we've faced over the last year and a half, because cities generally provide services. That's what we do. So even thinking about something like elections, we had to do first time a presidential primary since 1992 during COVID. And I'm on the election subcommittee for the League of Minnesota Cities. And so you just, I had a chance to hear what municipalities were dealing with and how they were handling challenges across the state. And it helped me have full faith that our city clerk staff was doing everything in a fine fashion to keep people safe, to make sure that there were adequate voting facilities, and just making sure that we had enough election judges, even though some people had to drop out because they got ill or the threat of getting ill. And so, and that committee, the Improving Services Delivery Committee, also has to do with everything from water utility and sewer to public safety. So, learning about some of the challenges, like we just heard from Commissioner Harrington on sort of the state of public safety in the state. And it just helps you make informed decisions. I'm on the Metro Cities, Metro Agencies Committee, and that's the group that works with Met Council. Met Council sets housing goals, for instance, for all of the metro cities. I'm a Southwest Suburban Cable Commissioner, and that's important because people don't realize that municipalities deliver cable access. So things like if you want to watch your city council meeting, or you want to watch your school board meeting on TV or educational television, cities provide that. And the federal government changed the rules a few years ago, and now municipalities are no longer able to use cable franchise fees to pay for those services. But it helped me work with staff to make sure that we had a different funding stream to provide those services moving forward. And I'm on the I'm the liaison to the Economic Development Advisory Commission, which helps me understand all of the financial mechanisms for enabling the things that are important to people, like workforce housing, affordable housing, development, infrastructure. And it's harder than you think, and it takes a long time to know. And so, and I'm also on I'm the liaison to the Minnetonka Family Collaborative that supports children and families at risk. And it's a group of nonprofits that's administered through Minnetonka Public Schools. And it's a very inspirational group of people. And that just helps you know all of the wonderful services, the private public partnerships, and just the wonderful people that are out in the community that really help our community and residents in it. So, yeah.
So all of these committees were these always areas of interest that you had, or was it that somebody needs to fill these roles and it sounded interesting to you?
Well, like I said, I'm a very naturally curious person.
Okay.
And so just like being a public official, you learn a lot, right? And for the Energy, Environment, and Natural Resources Committee, that was of huge interest to me. So my husband's a retired wildland firefighter and emergency manager. And so the environment's been really important to us, in our family, but also, and climate change has sort of been on top of mind in my family for a lot longer than the average citizen. But also it happens to be the #1 issue in the city survey year after year. And so to be able to work on issues that are important to our residents, I mean, that's what I got elected for. So that's like an extra layer of satisfaction. And then in terms of service delivery, I mean, really, that's what cities do. So to have the opportunity to shape and learn about all of the services that cities provide and advocate for funding and good policy at the state legislature is tremendously satisfying. So yeah, I mean, I've advocated at the state legislature. Even before I got elected, I was on the Hopkins Legislative Action Coalition for the Hopkins School District for 4 years when my kids were still in school. And, that's how change is made, developing those relationships with your legislators. We have to do things like get sales tax breaks on our very expensive public safety facility to save our taxpayers money, and having those relationships is tremendously helpful.
So you have this background as a lobbyist or organizer before I
was just a parent, and it was something that went through the school, it was kind of an arm of the school board. So
Sure.
It was just like a parent lobbyist.
Okay. Okay, fair enough. It's interesting though, you listed all of these committees that you're on. And, the one thing, and I brought this up when I talked to John Kuhl, who's running for mayor of Minnetonka a few weeks ago, and we talked, all of these areas that you're interested in, this is not a full-time job.
No.
I mean, it certainly feels like it with everything that you're doing.
Definitely.
What is your full-time job?
I am the administrative manager for the finance department in the city of St. Paul.
Okay.
So it's kind of a crazy job, and I do anything from HR to procurement.
Yes. That's
so
quite
yes.
It's quite a range.
Yes. So I'm the person that ordered every widget for the HVAC, the CARES Act HVAC retrofit for the city, and the LED light retrofit for the 166 buildings in the city of St. Paul. And I also do HR and schedule and do all kinds of other things.
Those things don't seem remotely related to each other.
No, but that just shows you I can multitask, and I'm multi-talented.
So what's it like working for one city and serving an entirely different? Do you pick things up from each position that sort of is applicable to the other?
Definitely. I mean, it's so valuable because, for instance, you just you feel a lot of understanding from the staff position, you know, as a public official. There's a spectrum of understanding on the city council, you know, right now about sort of what it's like to be a staff member, what your relationship is to them, what their role is. And as a staff member in another city, that is a great perspective to have. It gives you a lot of empathy for the amount of work that people do and how dedicated our Minnetonka staff is and what a good job they do. That's one thing. And then you just learn, you know, how different it is in one city that has a different form of government with a strong mayor, and our form of government, which is a charter city with a weak mayor system, where the city manager is the CEO and the city council is like the board of directors. And so you learn about, you know, that structure, and also just how, you know, different, you know, just every city is going to be different. But having a larger city versus a suburb and all that, you learn a lot about how different cities function.
And strong mayor, weak mayor, those were not necessarily commentary on the mayors themselves, more the
No.
systems of government.
It's just the comment on the systems of government. So we are a charter city where, as I mentioned, it is not the mayor who is the ultimate executive. The mayor is just, you know, has one vote like every other city council member, is a little more visible, signs documents and so on and so forth. But it's the city manager who is the manager and the CEO of the city. Whereas in St. Paul, for instance, the mayor is the CEO. The mayor runs the show. It's different. It's a different system.
Yeah, absolutely. So having this experience in both, which do you prefer? Having seen both really close up.
That is a great question. And I think certainly for a city of our size, I would say that our current system is a good system. Yeah. You know, because really the staff are experts. And like you say, this is a part-time job. This is their full-time job. They have degrees in this stuff, you know, this is what they do. And so there's a level of expertise I think it would be hard to have as an average, you know, mayor or city council member, because you can only specialize in so much. So to have that kind of expertise, managing personnel and so on and so forth, and frankly, because it's part-time here, you know, the mayor is a full-time job in the city of St. Paul. That's a paid position. You know, I think doing that in Minnetonka, it changes your taxation structure, your salary structure. I don't know. I think it works well here in Minnetonka.
I was going to say that very large financial implications, I would think,
yeah.
to go the St. Paul route, if you will. You know, one of the things you mentioned, which I think is really interesting, that I think a lot of people may not know, is just, you know, how much of the behind the scenes stuff the city staff do. Obviously, you and the mayor and the other council members are the very visible ones, but you're ultimately voting on the thing, you know, the background that the staff puts together, you know, the engineering folks, the planners, the finance staff. That's the level that comes through.
Yep. Well, and you know, the thing is, there's sometimes misunderstanding, for instance, about, you know, how things get on agendas. So you know, there are set things that we have to vote on, like the budget. You know, those are always going to come up. You know, projects, you know, development projects are going to come up. But there are things that we can bring forward on agendas for discussion in study sessions or informal meetings, but it has to be decided by a majority of the council. And it's also sort of misunderstood, you know, how staff gets things on the agenda. They work at the direction of the city council. So if there's something extra that we want to get on, it has to be a majority of the council that gives direction to the staff. And then they have to do the hard work of doing all the research, giving us the backgrounds that we can, you know, either study it or make an informed decision on whatever the agenda item is.
Yeah, I learned really quickly when I used to cover suburban city government that when I wanted to really go to school on an issue, that's who I go to, is find the appropriate staff person
Oh yeah.
leading something. You look at the agenda, you see who's driving it, and you call them up and say, okay, help me understand this.
Right. And so for
And they're
me,
great, at that.
yes, absolutely. And for me, the city manager is ultimately the manager. And, when I want to talk to a staff member or I need more information, I work through the city manager so that it's not me giving direction to staff, because there's a bright line. They don't work directly for city council. They work for the city manager. It's a bright line. I do occasionally talk to them, but I work through her first.
And that seems like the right way to do it, just in terms of like a sort of separation of powers way,
Exactly.
if you will.
Yep.
So you're out campaigning to some degree, I would imagine. I know COVID is still a thing, but you're still out and about a lot.
A lot. No, many hours a week. Yes.
What's the most common question you get asked on the trail by the residents of Minnetonka?
That's funny. I think what's so funny is that the question that is asked is, what are the issues they ask me what are the issues in Minnetonka, and I'm always asking them what's important to you. But the question that's posed to me is, what are you hearing on the doors, or what's the prevailing issue in Minnetonka? And I would say that there are several. I think that sort of for the sort of day-to-day, like regular stuff, it would be that sort of tension between the local desire to protect our natural resources, our green space, and our need for development, responsible development. I think there's, a need, a very important need for both. And managing that is one of the most important things that city council members need to make decisions on. So I'd say that's a big one. I think right now, I hear from a few people about, managing the pandemic or our response to the pandemic. And I've been really proud of Minnetonka and the staff and the elected and appointed officials, because right after COVID was declared, the city staff came up with $225,000 in small business grants, up to $7,500 for local small businesses, and to help them make payroll and just get over the hump. And we also set aside $150,000 shortly thereafter for housing assistance. And it was administered through ICA Food Shelf. And I went to an event at ICA Food Shelf, and they had a poster on the wall that said normally the entire budget for housing assistance for a year would be $100,000, and they had $1 million in housing assistance need. And so, that is clearly, something that I'm hearing from people that work on those nonprofits that I work with, whether it's ICA Food Shelf or Resource West or housing organizations or what have you. Just making sure that people who have lost their incomes can, keep body and soul together. And I actually, really politics is about people. And because of my relationships with some of the people in those nonprofits, I got a call from someone who works in a housing organization that had learned about an unhoused family living behind a gas station off of Highway 7 near 101. And we were, I connected her with the economic development director, and they were able to get them into temporary housing, which enables them to get into the social services system. You need temporary housing with, like an actual physical address to even get in the system. And so they were able to start the process of getting them more stable housing. And that's why, learning about all this stuff and being in these groups is so important.
I mean, it's an amazing story, and it's amazing you're able to help do that. And it really sort of illustrates the old adage, all politics is local. If that's something you believe, you are very much on the front line of
Not just that it's
that.
local, it's people. I mean, you're
Yeah.
doing this to help people. It's not an abstraction to me.
Right.
And so all of these things I do, I'm sort of a natural networker, and I'm always trying to connect people with the resources that they need. And so this was just like a perfect illustration of why those relationships are important, and how it can really help someone. And of course, one of the things that I want to do as a city council member is create the conditions whereby that family would never have had to be there in the first place.
Right.
And so, working on things like affordable housing or workforce housing, we've been able to build 549 units of housing at various levels of affordability since I was elected, and we're in the process of building more. And it's not enough, and it's probably not affordable enough, but it is something that I'm working very hard on, because when we're talking about affordable housing, we are talking about the fact that we can't keep our firefighters in Minnetonka because they're paid on call and they can't afford to live here. We're talking about our nurses, our teachers, people like my children who I'd very much like to live near me,
Mm-hmm.
that have student loan debt, that have good jobs but are still paying off their student loans, or the people that work at Ridgedale Mall and keep our economy humming. They deserve to live here. And so those are the things that I do want to tackle.
And when you talk about the size of Minnetonka, I mean, it stretches really far east in that way. I think it is Minnetonka, and east of that, and Hopkins High School is Minnetonka.
Right.
It's
right
up to the St. Louis Park border, and pretty far into the Southwest also.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's you have different terrain.
Yeah.
So you get east, and it's a little like down by where the Southwest Light Rail is going in. There's quite a bit of density. As you go west, lots get bigger, houses get bigger, there's and they're different it's an older community, so there's some old construction, some new construction. And you have very different neighborhood characters, which makes it so much fun to door knock. So much fun.
That's excellent. So what are you politically, obviously, let's not counting our chickens here in this upcoming election, but what are you hoping aspirationally for you politically? Yeah.
Like
do you want,
like if I had aspirations beyond city council?
Yes. Yes.
I would say I have come to really appreciate the nonpartisan government.
Mm-hmm.
I think it allows leaders to make decisions that are based on the merits of the issue and not political posturing. I think there's been, for the first time since I can remember, there's a sense of partisanship kind of seeping into the actual campaign. And that's kind of new. And I think it's terribly unfortunate, because I think about like when the Southwest Light Rail was coming through, was being decided on, and there was a broad array of political views on the council, and yet there was consensus that it would benefit Minnetonka, that it would create development opportunities, economic opportunities, housing opportunities, which are coming to fruition now. And so from very conservative to relatively liberal, backgrounds on the council, there was consensus. And I think that like at the state legislature, that would have been impossible. And so I really feel like we are able to make more nimble decisions, because we can reach consensus, because we can just talk about the issue without the rest of it coming in. And I really am hoping that we can preserve that on the council, because it does help move issues forward that people might consider controversial. I mean, climate change shouldn't be controversial,
Right.
but it is. And so, being able to come to consensus on the council about a sustainability commission and, funding staff for our sustainability issues is something that might not happen in a different community if they have more political views seeping into the decision making.
Well, it's interesting that it's really only just started to seep in. I would have thought that some of that would have happened much earlier, given the sort of way things have, the direction things, I should say, have gone, seemingly. So, everything is becoming political.
Everything is becoming political, and I think it's really unfortunate that partisanship is kind of seeping in at this level. So, but that said, I think, I'm just running on my accomplishments and my priorities. We're doing a good job on modern infrastructure, and I just want to continue that work. Since I was elected, we went 100% solar in all city facilities, and that saves taxpayers $12.5 million over 10 years and is great for the environment. So that city facilities lighting and the power that powers our water system is all through solar subscriptions. We're replacing all our pipes. You might have noticed driving around that, Minnetonka Boulevard has been dug up because we're replacing water sewer.
It would be hard not to notice that, yes.
But it's so good because then we don't have to worry about outflow and inflow, which is basically infiltration of things you don't want in your pipes, and stuff seeping out of pipes that you don't want seeping out. So,
it's not, that stuff's not, it's not the sexy stuff. A lot of government. That's, I think, the other thing. It's like, it's not the big fancy decisions that get made. It's the everyday things that touch people's lives is what you're doing.
You should have seen me when we were deciding about our budget, and we were talking about a camera system for our water and sewer where we could just put a camera in and see where the holes were. And I was so geeked out, the entire staff was just rolling. So I was like, that is so cool. But it is really cool.
It is very cool. Well, Deb, we're going to let you get back to whether it's campaign time or work time.
It is work time. This is my lunch hour. So
I'm going to let you get back to your lunch hour, but last two questions. And we asked them to you 5 years ago, and I'm curious to see if anything's changed. What is your favorite Jewish holiday?
Oh, Passover. I love it. Passover's the best. The food, the songs. I mean, because I love singing Dayenu and everything else. I'd say Passover's my favorite. Plus, it's the one where we generally do get together as a family. And the sentiment, I just think remembering other people who are still experiencing bondage, who are not free to make their own decisions. I think it's just a really good reminder of, quite frankly, why I'm in public service.
That answer is almost verbatim from 5 years ago, by the way. All the at least you checked off all the reasons. And what is your favorite Jewish food?
Oh my gosh, how can I choose?
Okay, again, that's basically the same thing you said then too.
If it counts, it would be my grandmother's mandelbrot.
That was it.
Yeah. Because it's still my favorite.
Deb, I appreciate the consistency. Well, Deb Calvert, thank you so much for joining me. Best of luck to you in this coming election in November, and we will check back on election night and see how it did. But thank you for spending some time with me.
Thank you. It was very good to talk to you.
You as well. The Who the Folk podcast is part of the Jew Folk Podcast Network, a product of Jew Folk Inc. Please subscribe, rate, and review the show wherever you get your podcasts. If you have suggestions for other podcast guests, please email them to me at editor@tcjewfolk.com. For our other shows, check out tcjewfolk.com/podcast.